All right, welcome everyone. We'll call this conference committee to order. So this is the conference committee on Senate File 2370, otherwise known as the Omnibus Cannabis Bill. Today is May 16th, 2025. The time is 8:30. We're in the State Capitol, room G15. A quorum is present. Members, our agenda today is to hear the combined version as agreed to by House and Senate conferees of Senate File 2370. And to start us off, we're going to have public testimony. I think an agenda is printed, so we'll just go in the order of those who have been called ahead to seek an opportunity to testify. We're looking for, a couple of minutes from everyone. We'll be, a little bit lenient, but not very lenient. Do we have a timekeeper? Are you going to keep time? So Mr. Will keep time. With that, Mr. Chair, any opening comments?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. So we will start off with Eric Taubel, the Interim Director of the Minnesota Office of Cannabis Management. We will give you, Mr. Taubel, a little more than a couple of minutes if you need them. Take the time you need.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate the time. I also would like to express some gratitude to each of the members of the conference committee who, over the course of the session, took time to meet with me and my team to talk about cannabis policy, and what we think we need to make sure that we get this market launched. So a deep thanks to everyone. The bill includes a number of OCM recommendations, and we really appreciate the continued coordination and cooperation with the legislature as we continue the process of building this market. The last year and a half, as we have grown from 0 to now over 100 people in the building, has helped us really hone in on what we see as the office's mission. And the office remains focused on implementing Chapter 342 to foster an equitable cannabis industry that prioritizes public health and safety, consumer confidence, and market integrity. This bill has provisions that touch on each of those sort of broad categories within the mission statement, and has sort of, I think, 4 key areas that we appreciate the support on. The first is the cannabis licensing rollout. As part of this bill, we create a licensing variance for testing facilities to address barriers to entry for testing facilities. Every market that has launched has had some amount of slowdown related to the lack of testing capacity. We've identified a couple places where we can ease the burden of entry for new testing facilities into the market, and those changes are reflected in this bill, and we're grateful, and we hope that it will allow newer testing facilities to start faster and get us our product tested quicker and ensure that the market has safe and tested product available to consumers. We've also made changes to improve the application process based on learned experience during the last 12 months or so. But we've tried to do so without creating any further delays. We've also recommended some clarifications to the social equity qualification standards to ensure that the sort of reach of the social equity provisions reach all those who were intended to benefit. One of the priorities of the office has and will continue to be continuity for medical patients in the medical program. One of the biggest changes we made is really a change to the ability for medical cannabis providers to make use of telehealth and remote consultation opportunities between a cannabis pharmacist or a cannabis consultant and a medical patient. We've removed language that created a burden that would prevent us from allowing that to happen. So moving forward, we anticipate we'll be able to see greater access for Minnesotans who need medical cannabis across the state. We've also done something that is really, I think, incredible, which is proposed to strengthen the civil and legal protections for medical patients in the registry. In addition to strengthening some of the civil fees associated with violations of their rights, we've also provided an opportunity for these people to use the courts to stop actions that could be harmful based on their participation in the medical cannabis registry. As part of the cannabis market, we also oversee the hemp market, and we have a couple of provisions that are oriented towards helping us launch the hemp market in a timely and helpful fashion. We've improved the application process for hemp businesses, which, as I said, will prevent any further delays in launching that market, and we look forward to doing that relatively soon here in the fall. And then finally, there's a number of provisions throughout this bill that clarify program administration. There's technical fixes, targeted fixes, corrections of duplicative words or sort of errors like that within our existing statutes. And I think one of the more important things we've done is also provide some clarity in the order of operations for securing local approval, particularly in that retail registration process, to try to ease some of the tension between applicants, cities, local governments, and the state about when and how they should be able to seek out approval at the local government and acquire a retail registration. As an office, we continue to make significant milestones in the implementation of the cannabis market, and I think this legislation will support our shared goals of launching a safe, well-regulated market. Again, I'm very grateful for the time each of you spent with me and my team and the work you've done on this cannabis bill, and I look forward to implementing it soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Towell, and let me also express our gratitude to you and your team for all of your hard work and your extra overtime duty and getting me up to speed. So, thanks. So I'll call Mark Hazy. Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question for Mr. Tobble. I'll let him make his way back. Mr. Chair, Mr. Tobble, have you had a chance to review the delete everything, and does OCM have any concerns with that language?
Yeah, we have had a
Director
chance.
Tobble.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Chair. We have had a chance to review it, and we have no edits, thoughts, or concerns.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rasmussen. All right, Mark Hazy from the Expungement. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Dibble, Chair Stevenson, and members. My name is Mark Hazy. I'm Deputy Director and General Counsel for the Cannabis Expungement Board. On behalf of the board, I want to thank you for including most of the language that we had requested in the conference committee report. Especially for the public, I just want to clarify what the language does and doesn't do. For your reference, it starts at page 86 of the conference committee report. And also I wanted to thank Senator Port in particular for carrying this language in the Senate and Representative Hollins in the House. What the bill does is addresses some inconsistencies between what we believe was the intent of the legislation originally and how the statute was written. A big part of that is the way the statute was written. There were some past felony cannabis offenses that the board could not consider. And so this makes it so that any past cannabis felony offense, if it meets other eligibility criteria, the board could review and potentially expunge. There's another part of this that addresses an issue that's arisen with the courts. Last year, after the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension sent about 57,000 cases to the courts that they determined were eligible for automatic expungement. These are misdemeanors under the 2023 statute. The courts issued an administrative order in part stating that because of the way they handle their records, when one of these otherwise eligible counts under automatic expungement are part of a multi-count case, they're not able to seal just part of that case. So those cases will remain open. The court is saying they're not able to do that. And they said that is about 25,000 cases of those 57,000. In our discussions with court administration, they are assuming that the courts will have to do the same under the expungement board expungements. And so we had requested language that was in the Senate side that would have allowed the expungement board to have the court seal the entire case when there was an eligible count if all the other counts were dismissals. There were some concerns with that in the House, and so that language was taken out in the House. What the language here does, I understand, is a compromise, and we appreciate that sometimes what has to happen, but what the compromise will do is if all the other counts in the case are cannabis counts, then we can have the court seal that entire case. We don't know exactly how many or what percentage of cases this will cover, but using a very small sampling, I found that about 14% this is again a small sampling, just 75 multi-count cases, about 14% are all cannabis counts that would make this new language, make those eligible. So there will still be a lot of multi-count cases that the courts aren't going to seal. Again, thank you, and I'll remain here for any questions.
Great, thank you, Mr. Hawsey. Questions, members? All right, thank you very much. All right, Ley Fati, welcome.
Thank you, chairs and members. My name is Ley Fati. I am partner at Blunt Strategies, a strategic consultancy dedicated to Minnesota's cannabis industry. I'm also the owner of Crested River, a vertically integrated hemp business 2 hours west of here in Morgan, Minnesota. I appreciate the opportunity to testify early on the agenda today because it gives me an opportunity to frame some of the issues that you're going to hear about today from patients, small business owners, and advocates who will follow me, people whose lives and livelihoods are being directly shaped by the decisions before you today. This draft conference report contains a lot of important and good policies, and I do support its passage. That said, it omits some important policies and misses the mark on others. This legislature passed one of the most visionary cannabis laws in the country 2 years ago, rooted in equity, public health, and economic opportunity for small and local businesses. But what we're seeing now, both in implementation and in legislative follow-up, is not aligned with the principles that earned this law overwhelming public and bipartisan support. Instead, the regulatory framework is becoming increasingly fear-based rather than risk-based, layering on costs, restrictions, and inconsistencies that defy both common sense and real-world market dynamics. For small hemp businesses, it's becoming more expensive, more restricted, and more confusing to operate than it is for adult use businesses. We're told that the intent was to ensure a regulated and responsible market, but what's actually happening is for these small businesses, especially those that are operating in the lower potency space, they're facing the highest fees, the most limited operating margins, and the least clear pathways to market stability. While I appreciate that the conference report includes a license pathway for low-potency hemp edible wholesalers, the $10,000 license fee is unreasonable and structurally incoherent with the rest of the fee schedule. It's more expensive to operate as a hemp wholesaler than as a meso business, which allows for cultivation, manufacturing, wholesale, and retailing of hemp and adult use products, and includes 15,000 square feet of cultivation. It's not just disproportionate, it's absurd, and it reveals a fundamental misunderstanding in who actually needs this license. It's not just beer and liquor wholesalers, it's small hemp businesses. Many of us serving wellness-focused consumers that don't want to shop in the adult use space, and many of us operating in localities that are functionally banning adult use businesses through zoning and regulation. And for us, hemp isn't the side hustle, it is the actual business. For medical patients, the system is moving towards less product availability, fewer access points, and higher prices, the exact opposite of what patients and their families were promised. For social equity operators, the advantages that were promised have been delayed, diminished, or quietly dismantled. And for local governments, instead of receiving clear guidance and support they need to regulate appropriately, they've been left in a state of either paralysis or overreach, where they're either confused about what they're allowed to do to support the businesses that they want setting up in their jurisdictions, or emboldened to use zoning and ordinances to functionally ban these businesses from their communities while opening municipal dispensaries and selling hemp edibles through municipal liquor stores. And now on top of that, all of these businesses are facing a proposal to increase the tax rate on hemp and cannabis products by 50%. I sit at the intersection of all of these dynamics as a policy advocate, as a hemp business owner, and someone who's hearing daily from other businesses, from local officials, and from patients who really are desperate for us to get it right. And I think we're dangerously close to moving towards a system that's really contradicting the very principles that earned this legislation, its historic support. I thank you for your leadership. I do support the passage of this conference report. and I appreciate the opportunity to testify today. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, members? All right, thank you. Mike Golick.
Good morning. My name is Michael Golick. I am owner and founder of Natrium. We're a veteran-owned company. We focus on wellness. For those that don't know, the beginning stages of this, I helped advocate for many stores, went to many city council meetings. I helped open a dozen and a half stores, which most are open still currently, but face a lot of the challenges that have been impacted by the legislation, ranging from taxes, imposing fees, misunderstandings of what product is legal or not. And this continues to be confusing. I'm looking at, when we're talking about hemp product here, 23.25 and 23.26, we're talking about 0.5 milligrams of all other cannabinoids per serving. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, we started this industry by advocating for health, for wellness, for people who needed the product. Additionally, we continue to advocate for people in social equity, people who struggled, people who were locked up, people who were trying to start a business and make a living for themselves. Yet, we stand at an impasse where big liquor continues to encroach itself and move into this industry and take everything from us. So, you know, with the stores that I helped start, I ended up starting a distribution company on the wellness side. And now I'm seeing a $10,000 imposed fee with an annual $10,000 renewal. So I'm just curious, did we start this industry to help people who were struggling, wanted to get into business? Or are we just going to hand this off to people with boatloads of money in their pocket? Lastly, the final thing I actually want to make a point about is Minnesota specifically is struggling with a lot of empty real estate. And I can testify right now and tell you that a lot of this empty real estate could be filled with optimal businesses such as low dose and high dose retail. And we've been giving a lot of power to the local cities, and they don't know what they're doing. And now we're hoping that they can run a shop. Like, let that sink in. These people don't know what they're doing in zoning, and they're going to be able to run a shop now. So I'm just here to ask that we take a second look at this. I realize, you know, some of these things have to be passed, but the director here mentioned burden of ease. The burden of ease would be to limit some of these fees, allow functional cannabinoids to be used more often in a low-dose space, make some of these inspections a little bit more clear, these products a little bit more clear, and the importation laws, that's going to impose a very hefty fine on some of these products coming in. Now, I'm very pro-Minnesota. 99% of my product is Minnesota that's on my shelf. I did that on purpose. I wanted to focus on small business and support small business, but the industry is showing that small business is not going to be able to survive if we continue this path. I mean, it's very clear to me. Every 2 weeks, I'm getting a phone call from a store owner. I don't know if I can keep my doors open. Jamie from House of Oil Works had to close her doors because Anuka zoned her out, and then now, guess what? They're deciding to open up a store. And these are the things that we're facing. You know, government and big business, maybe not colluding, we don't know, but are obviously encroaching to take the space from people, small operators like ourselves. So I ask that they take a second look and take heed to some of the things I just said. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Golick. Patrick Mclellan.
Thank you, Senator Dibble and members. My name is Patrick McLellan. I was part of the small group that fought for the legalization of medical cannabis with Representative Mlullen and Senator Dibble over 10 years ago, long before GTI and Vireo existed in this state. And I have been an outspoken critic of both of those companies ever since. We came to the Capitol because we wanted access to legal and safe medical cannabis medications that people could afford, and we're still waiting. I support these changes today because the medical cannabis program is on life support. The mistakes of the past have created a medical cannabis market that couldn't function, creating lack of consumer choice and high prices. We need to support medical cannabis manufacturers by easing canopy size, removing the canopy ratio, and unifying the supply chain. Medical cannabis manufacturers must be able to operate in a cost-effective and efficient manner. It's going to be the smaller businesses that are going to drive innovation and lower prices. Without making these changes, the medical cannabis market will collapse. Letting the program collapse means patients will stop seeking medical advice from their doctors and pharmacists. We'll lose our legal protections for employment, housing, and hospitals, and these are critical to all of us. Medical cannabis users are the most vulnerable users of these products. Patients need access to a medically supervised program, and we should not be getting medical advice at the dispensary. I believe there's still time to create a viable medical cannabis market, and we can make all the compromises to get us there. I'm more than willing to, lay down the problems I've had with those manufacturers and do anything that I can to save this program. The cannabis industry and the legislature need to stand up for patients because we're the reason it was legalized in the first place. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. McClellan. Nice to see you. Josh Wilkins Simon.
Good morning, Omnibus Cannabis Bill conferees. My name is Josh Wilkins Simon. I'm owner of Legacy Glassworks, Legacy Cannabis, and Legacy Cup. Thank you all for your tireless work on cannabis policy. I'm testifying today in support of the conference committee report. The Omnibus Cannabis Bill makes many important fixes that will help support the launch of the new cannabis marketplace, assist small cannabis businesses, and protect medical cannabis patients. The biggest barrier to the state's anticipated summer launch is the current law requiring all cannabis testing labs to be accredited, a process that can take over a year. The simple fix contained in this bill would allow labs to start their accreditation process while still being able to test the state's first cannabis products. Without this, we could very well be over a year from dispensaries opening. Minnesota's initial cannabis legislation contains a requirement that all transport has to have 2 drivers present at all times. This is unnecessary and incredibly costly for small cannabis businesses. Removing this requirement is also contained within this bill. Concern on many prospective cannabis businesses' mind is how they will market their products in a very restrictive advertising space. Again, this bill solves an important issue by allowing cannabis businesses to provide small samples of their products at 21+ licensed cannabis events. This bill wisely allows visiting medical cannabis patients access to the Minnesota medical marketplace and also increases medical cannabis patient protections. One outstanding issue that needs to be considered next session is clarifying how municipalities issue retail registrations in relation to retail caps passed by local ordinances. There's currently an incredible amount of confusion and anxiety from prospective retail operators due to the inability of cities to explain what triggers when the number of licenses available start to deplete in capped cities. This very well could result in large swaths of the state without dispensaries. Finally, I need to speak on a critical issue that I know is not part of this bill, but needs to be discussed. The legislature and governor appear to have cut a deal to raise the cannabis tax by 50%. This new rate of 15% would stack on top of state and local sales tax. This new rate for a customer in Minneapolis would be 24.03%. This would result in Minnesota having one of the highest cannabis taxes in the country, matching California and surpassing New York and Massachusetts. California has a ton of data on how the illicit market is 3 to 4 times the regulated market due to their high tax rate. The Office of Cannabis Management is tasked with eliminating the illicit market, and increasing the Minnesota cannabis tax by 50% will ensure that that never happens. The state of Minnesota is hoping to raise more money from cannabis to balance the budget, but less Minnesotans will buy cannabis from dispensaries, and thus the state will not actually see an increase in revenue. As cannabis policy leaders, please reject this massive tax increase. Thank you for allowing public testimony, and look forward to working with you all in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkins Simon. I think we have Angela Dawson joining us virtually through the magic of technology.
Yes. Thank you. Good morning.
Welcome, good morning.
Good morning, co-chairs, and thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony today. My name is Angela Dawson. I'm a fourth-generation Minnesota farmer, and I've also been working to support and train farmers of color across the region to produce organic hemp and compliant cannabis products for the past 10 years. I'm speaking today, however, as CEO of Bold North Holdings, a social equity micro business preliminary licensee. I also serve as farmer representative and vice chair of the Governor's Cannabis State Advisory Council. I just want to be real brief here and say that I appreciate the work that the committee is doing via the updated conference report. I'm just still going through it, but I just wanted to raise just a couple of issues that came to me as I've been reading it so far, especially around the goal of streamlining the medical cannabis market. I understand that's really important. That's been a bottleneck for a while. But I must say, as a cannabis farmer who has had to leave my state in order to serve medical cannabis patients over the years, I still feel locked out of the industry that I have been working so hard to help build. As a social equity micro business preparing to serve patients with serious illnesses in my community, I have been committed to building a safe and responsible business, but I still don't have a real clear path forward on how I can compete with the large MSOs and still serve my community. For example, the way the bill sits now, I'm not able to self-transport, and larger companies are, but I have to take on the expense of hiring a transporter. Still not having access to quality medical products through wholesaling, and also just not being exempt from local retail registrations. Those are benefits that companies that are well-funded have that I do not have, and I don't know why it's going to be allowed for them to still only serve medical cannabis patients. I know there are medical cannabis patients in my community that want product from me, and I'm not clear that it's going to be affordable still for me to produce for them. And with already being in motion and investing in a business, I'm just concerned that that streamlined proposal comes short on being able to provide equitable access. That's one of the things that was not mentioned in the report. It talked about providing streamlined access for patients, but it also did not keep or preserve the social equity, the equity principles that has been so important to this legislation all along. So I encourage the conferees to continue refining the proposal. I stand ready to contribute to all the productive conversations to that end, and I support. Otherwise, I support the approval of the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Patty Gilk.
Good morning.
Welcome.
I'm here to talk about the hemp side of the bill. Thank you for the positive changes you've made so far to save my business, but there are a few other
Ms.
things I
Gilk,
would
please
like.
just introduce yourself for the record, thanks.
I'm sorry?
Just please introduce yourself for the record.
My name is Patty Gilk. I'm a registered nurse and the owner and founder of Just Natural CBD Wellness.
Thank you.
7 years ago, I had 3 kids in college, John, Emily, and Sam, and I started researching the science behind CBD products for natural solutions to my symptoms. CBD helped me so much that I opened my first location in Excelsior to educate our community and to provide safe product. Now, 6 years later, we have grown to 3 locations, Excelsior, Eden Prairie, and Victoria. Not only do we educate the community, we are members of 3 local chambers, donate to many local causes, and help thousands of people. In 2023, we were awarded Business of the Year by the Excelsior Lake Minnetonka Chamber of Commerce. Over the years, there have been many bills coming through with ongoing changes. First, positive laws for consumer safety were put in place. This helped me to make business decisions like opening new locations. But now attempting to take away some of the legal products that I have been carrying in my stores could be devastating to my business. The majority of the products that Just Naturals offers are not intoxicating, and we do not sell any smokable products. In some of the changes in the bills, if some of the changes in these bills do not pass, it would significantly reduce the number of products we can offer our customers or make them so costly we couldn't be competitive. Many of my customers are Minnesota seniors, and a lot of them do not want to be forced to go into a recreational dispensary for their CBD products or buy them out of state online, unvetted products that we don't even know where they're from. There are 3 items that I would like your help with, and some of them you have already made great progress with. One is the limits on non-intoxicating cannabinoids. CBD is one of those cannabinoids. THC is intoxicating, CBD is not. Limiting the non-intoxicating cannabinoids to 25, which was now raised to 100, which I'm grateful for in HF 1615. This is also a larger bottle or more economical for the consumer. And so I think that with that is a great start for the increase in the limit. The second issue is the $10,000 a year wholesale cost to me. I vet the best products in the country. I have a ton of Minnesota products that meet the criteria. I have some out-of-state products that have been around for years. And if I am forced to be a wholesale buy a wholesale license at 10 grand a year, that's just an added expense. Or I'd have to buy from a distributor, like an alcohol distributor that probably doesn't have, in my opinion, the same standards that we might for gummies and different products. So we're limited in the selection for Minnesotans to be able to buy the best. The other thing would be, there's something in the bill that talks about all cannabinoids, CBD, THC, all of them being behind a counter or locked up. And that's a simple fix if you just add the word intoxicating cannabinoids should be locked up, because CBD on a shelf is not intoxicating. That could be something so that I can have my store with product out on the shelves and the intoxicating cannabinoids locked up. So please don't forget about small businesses. There's a huge demographic of Minnesotans that just want the low-dose hemp edible space. They don't want to have to go online to research. They can get education from us and other hemp businesses that are well-qualified. And one note on the tax. You know, I just made a big poster that said, "Stop taxing grandma's CBD oil." If someone comes in the shop in Excelsior, they're a senior citizen, say they spend $100 on non-intoxicating product like CBD oil. It's close, with the new tax, it'll be close to 25% on her product, and it's not even intoxicating. We knew from the beginning that THC or intoxicating products would be taxed. Everyone expecting that. But to tax grandma's CBD oil at the same rate as marijuana, I think we could look at that a little bit more and just take off that tax on the CBD products. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, Marin Schroeder also joining us remotely.
Thank you, Sen Jill, members of the committee, for the opportunity to tie remotely. AM is very early for those of us out. My name is Marin Schroeder, and I'm here on behalf of the Minnesota Drug Policy Resource Center, or MIN, to the patient representative advisory council. First, the inclusion of updated patient protections is a long overdue win, something I've personally worked on for the past 6 years. For too long, discrimination protections for medical cannabis patients existed only on paper. This change makes those rights real, enforceable, accessible, and meaningful. The expansion of MnStat 34256 to ensure healthcare facilities accommodate hemp-derived and adult-use cannabis products for registry patients is a critical, compassionate step forward. As both an advocate and a caregiver to one of those patients, I'm deeply grateful for your work on this. However, I need to be direct. The so-called streamlining report, line 80.11, for Minnesota's cannabis supply chain is a complete misfire. Rather than hearing patients, business owners, and advocates asking for an efficient and accessible unified regulatory structure, the conference report simply asks OCM for a report that preserves silos, protects large operators, and continues to put the needs of patients in the backseat. So-called streamlining without unification undermines small business access to the medical cannabis customer, limits patient choice, and ultimately does little to nothing to improve the cost or accessibility of medical cannabis, especially for patients who continue to bear the highest burden under our current system. Why should patients have a slimmer selection of cannabis products than recreational users when they visit their neighborhood cannabis retailer? True streamlining means one supply chain, which promotes flexibility for operators to sell products they produce as medical or recreational, depending on the transaction, is inclusive of available products for patients, including all adult use and hemp products on the shelves, and is a policy informed by stakeholder conversations, not something devised in negotiations. This matters for patients as it impacts possession and purchase limits, taxation, and those rights I discussed above. Patients forced to purchase in the adult use market become subject to the purchase and possession limits and the soon-to-be increased cannabis tax, and they lose some of those protections of the program. MnCAN will continue to work with patients and small businesses to seek a unified regulatory framework that prioritizes public health, patient access, and a fair marketplace, not the convenience of incumbent operators or political expedience. We can and must do better for patients in Minnesota, and I'm really tired of saying that. Please don't make us work another 6 years to get there. Thank you for your work on this bill and for your continued commitment to building a system that truly serves Minnesotans. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schroeder. Sarah Wellington also joining us virtually.
Sorry, good morning. Good morning, members of the the hosts of this meeting, the members of the conference committee for SF 2370, the Cannabis Omnibus report. My name is Sarah Wellington. I am a disabled St. Paul mom and SPS St. Paul Public School teacher on leave, proudly a medical patient since the first years of inception. In fact, I was on the patient committee under Dayton as a cannabis consumer, even while I was a teacher for St. Paul schools, really advocating for myself, putting myself at risk. This was over 10 years ago. Patients worked for decades to access all types of cannabis medicine that was tested, safe, and with reasonable access, both with driving distances. We are a huge state. So many of us testify or come from the metro like me. But I love the outer state, Minnesota. I can't get medicine there, and other people can't either. We are not just a metro community, but we also must help with cost. And with some of these changes that we don't address that, and some we do. And thank you for those that we have passed. But almost 10 years later, after the joy-filled and hopeful start with the Minnesota Medical Cannabis Program, here we are. In 2025, patients are seeking medicine at gas stations, untested website products, Discord, Taco Bell parking lots, and maybe strangers. Why? Because there is not a clear access to safe medicine. We are a sick and isolated group in need of your leadership and support, please. Patients are still unable to access safe medicine. This is what we fought for and won. Safe medicine and protected access to the supply chain. Almost 10 years later, we don't have it. We have less fighters. There are less of us fighting in front of you. We are getting sicker. Some of us have even passed. We're taking care of others who got sicker too. Waiting on the action on the laws passed and the laws to come. We can't spend the time to ask you to fulfill the promises and hopes declared in past bills anymore. Please make access for us a priority in the sessions to come. We ask again to unify the supply chain and pass laws and protections that help us and reduce the harm and hurt for the patient protection of the right harm and hurt we are experiencing under the current system. Thank you for the patient protection and the right to bring our medical cannabis and hemp-derived products to the hospital and continue our healing routines with safe, protected access to my cannabis. With the unification of my medicine, we wouldn't be in the hospitals at all. Maybe. Please help us heal with a clear path for the medical consumer. Thank you for accepting responsibility for patient safety as our state's leaders. We count on you to carry our voices further. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Heather Tidd, also joining us virtually.
Senator and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Heather Tidd. I'm a resident of Lakeville, a parent of a former pediatric medical cannabis patient, and a longtime advocate for patients. I was in leadership of a clinic that certified patients for many years and helped get autism added as a qualifying condition. Through that work, I've supported many families navigating what remains a complicated and fragile system. I want to start by saying I fully support our work towards adult use cannabis. It's a real opportunity to build a system that's inclusive and equitable, especially for communities that have been harmed by cannabis prohibition. I'm hopeful that this broader market will bring more for medical patients, consistent access, better products, and a more stable supply chain. At the same time, I'm urging you to keep patients, especially children and families, at the center of this conversation and as the market develops. My son was one of the first children enrolled in the medical cannabis program in Minnesota. After years of trying medications with limited success and difficult side effects, medical cannabis gave him the stability he needed. He could focus, he stayed in school, he was able to manage his emotions, and today, 10 years later, he is a thriving young adult, something we did not truly believe was possible at the time and would not have been possible without medical cannabis. It changed everything for our family. I want to thank you for your thoughtful work to preserve patients and their safety during this time, in this transition. The protections you have built do matter deeply to families like mine. I also want to add that we've waited a really long time to be seen and heard. As I said, 10 years in, this is a chance right now for Minnesota to do what so many other states have not, which is build a system that truly works for patients with more access points, more product options, and more consistency in care. Patients that I have worked with are no longer here. And so it is really difficult to watch the folks standing up for this that have passed away and died and watch our numbers dwindling. And so it's an incredibly emotional thing for us. As the market continues to take shape, I hope you'll keep looking for ways to make it affordable, reliable, and inclusive. The supply chain unification may be one of the most effective tools to achieve that while maintaining protections that the patients need. I thank you for your time, your leadership, and your commitment to getting this right. This matters truly for patients and families in our community and for all Minnesotans. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Tidd. We're going to jump now to John Jones, also joining us virtually.
Thank you, Senator Dibble and conference committee members for having me here today. My name is John Jones. I'm an Iraq veteran who relies on medical cannabis to manage service-connected conditions like PTSD and chronic pain. I stand here today as a voice for countless Minnesota veterans who find themselves in similar situations, advocating for change that can improve our lives. My experience is rooted in service and commitment to duty. This is not about politics. This is about real people like me who need support and access to viable treatment options. As we approach the launch of an adult use cannabis market, I must highlight a significant issue. The current legal framework for medical cannabis has hardly adapted since 2014, leaving patients behind. The current laws allow businesses to enter the market, yet they create a risk-heavy and expensive landscape, resulting in a bifurcated supply chain. This leaves medical patients, including veterans, trapped in a restrictive program that has proven to be costly, limited, and inaccessible for nearly a decade. Many of us are forced to pay out of pocket for our medicine, and worst of all, some are pushed towards the illicit market. It's a painful irony to say we legalize cannabis, but veterans are still operating under a prohibition-era medical model. We are on the verge of creating two disparate markets. Chapter 342 licenses are being issued, setting the stage for adult use cannabis. However, no adult use businesses are operational yet. Without immediate changes, medical patients will continue to face hardships. We need to adapt the system to better allow adult use businesses to serve medical cannabis patients through their endorsements in an affordable and risk-averse way. Otherwise, we risk a policy failure that is both visible and avoidable. This isn't about the large businesses that are already incentivized to produce and sell med. This is about a wider market that patients and veterans have clamored for since at least 2009. Excuse me. The situation is particularly critical for veterans. Many of us live on fixed incomes and do not have access to cannabis prescribed by the VA. The complicated and expensive medical program is pushing us further from care. It's alarming to think that when the adult use market is operational, a tourist will find it easier to purchase cannabis than a veteran will to access the necessary medicine. That reality is morally bankrupt. I urge the legislator to act decisively, working with stakeholders to unify the supply chains for cannabis, making it easy for licensed adult use businesses to serve medical patients will create numerous benefits: lower prices through healthy competition, a wider variety of products, and a streamlined system that is easier to manage for businesses, creates better options for patients, and simplifies regulation. I implore this committee to work for policies that prevent a fractured cannabis market. This isn't about hypotheticals. The need for change is clear and urgent. We saw the storm coming. Don't let history say we did nothing. Thank you for your time and your considering the needs of Minnesota veterans in this critical moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. A couple of additional testifiers have been added. Kyle Marinkovich is not joining us, but we have Andrew Johnmeyer joining us next. All right, welcome, go ahead. Oh, we can't hear you. Can't quite hear you yet. All right. Still not hearing you. One moment. Mr. Will is going to give you a few tips, because it's probably not your mute button on Zoom itself. It's probably something on your laptop or in the app.
Hi, Andrew. I would just go to the audio in the bottom left-hand corner and click on the arrow, and then there might be another option for a microphone. That usually tends to be the issue when we can't hear testifiers.
Okay. Mr. John Meyer, we're going to jump. We have a few more folks who are going to present to us. So we'll have Mr. Will work with you on solving the technical problem. I'll call Bill Haas to the table, who wanted to share a thought with us. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. I'm Bill Haas. I represent White Earth Tribal Nation. And just had a couple things, and I emailed the two chairs this week about it. But on page 29, we're requesting that we just insert on line 62.8, after cannabis business, insert or hemp business. And this relates to stores opening that are not tribal on tribal land. So it's just a minor change, but I think it was just left out in an error. And then the other issue that we ran into is a quality issue. We're requesting that a label on flower be indicate that it's either indoor or outdoor grow, because outdoor grow, according to our growing supervisor, is a lower quality, and it's basically used for oils, and it's not a sterile environment, where the growing facility that grows the flower is a sterile environment. And so it's highly controlled, there's no contaminants, things like that, it's highly tested, and it's a clean flower when the consumer purchases it. So we just ask that you would consider just inserting another section to address the labeling to be indoor or outdoor grow. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, former Representative Haas, who I caught red-handed in my district once fishing off a pier in Lake Harriet.
He did, very much so. Yeah. And after you left, I caught some fish. But he had a license,
I'm sure.
Yeah, so.
I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
Thank you.
All right, so we'll take a look at those and have some discussion back here. We're not going to amend the report today, but appreciate you bringing the matter to us. I think we did solve our technical problems, so we'll go back to the testifier.
Hello, can you hear me
welcome.
now? Thank you. So Chairs Stevenson and Dibble, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify remotely today in spite of the technical difficulties. My name is Andrew Johnmeyer. I'm speaking today on behalf of Green Machine Cannabis, a preliminarily approved cannabis micro business. While I'm excited to finally be in a position to pursue my dream of opening a cannabis business, the committee's proposed changes have further dimmed the prospects of establishing a diverse, sustainable cannabis marketplace in Minnesota. Since the inception of the adult use cannabis program, small operators such as myself have been promised access to both adult use and medical cannabis markets through supply chain unification. Idea that was unrealized in 2023 and sadly remains so today. The committee's streamlining proposal still requires separation of the medical and adult use supply chains, a requirement that few, if any, micro businesses will be able to meet, effectively denying them access to the medical market, all while denying patients access to the reduced prices and increased product choices that a truly competitive market would provide. As a medical cannabis patient myself, I have long planned to produce for the medical market with my own cannabis business. I have seen firsthand the limits in patient choice and product quality that the current medical cannabis market has engendered. I know that my business can provide medically important cannabis products that are not currently available, but only if the supply chain is unified to eliminate the prohibitively expensive requirements for supply chain separation. And finally, I would like to address the most surprising and egregious of the recent changes to the cannabis program, the 50% tax increase on cannabis and hemp products. This recent addition was made without industry input, bypassing the months of open public debate in 2023 in favor of a deal made without public input that will hurt the market rollout and further entrench the legacy market. Perhaps unsurprisingly, this change has been received as a slap in the face by the still emergent cannabis industry, most of whom already feel like they have been failed by a leaderless bureaucracy, an uninterested executive, and legislators that don't seem to understand the problems. I urge the committee to reconsider their report. Please reject the cannabis tax increase and allow for a full supply chain unification in the medical and adult use cannabis markets. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Great. Thank you, Mr. John Meyer. I'll call anyone forward who hasn't had a chance to testify and didn't sign up ahead of time. Right. Please come forward.
You know, I gotta tell you, my name's Travis Colin. I own Freedom Soda. I'm a low-dose beverage dealer. I give the profits to people in prison for marijuana. I did 8 years when I was 21 for cannabis. I think everything's great. I think you guys are doing a great job. The 10% tax extra, 50%, will be a lot of problems, a lot more black market dealers. But other than that, I think you guys have been very responsive to the community. I think you've listened to us. I've watched other states roll out. There was none of that. So thank you. You guys have a good day.
Thank you. All right, anyone else? All right, I'm going to invite Senator Nelson forward. All right. So while Senator Nelson makes her way forward, she's coming at my invitation, and we have a couple of amendments to frame up the matters of interest to her. These are amendments that she offered on the floor of the Senate, and I assured her that we would raise these matters and put them in front of the conference committee, understanding that we weren't able to incorporate them into the report this year, but there no doubt will be probably a pretty extensive update to our laws next year. And so we'll have the opportunity to discuss and consider the ideas that Senator Nelson is working on. So Senator Nelson, welcome.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I so appreciate the opportunity to continue this important discussion. And I just wanted to share a couple things that I thought would be very appropriate for this committee to think about or in the future. And Mr. Chair, I believe that we have the A22 amendment. We know that's not going to be adopted today, but if members would like to, do they have a copy of that, Mr. Chair?
I'm sorry, what?
Do the members have a copy of the A22?
If they don't, they will soon. All right,
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you. So members, the A22 amendment speaks to cannabis limits. And in addition to that A22 amendment, I also am having distributed to you a little chart that shows what the current OCM rules are. It was a little hard to find, but they are updated as of April 14th. And then on the right, it shows what, according to the medical experts, and we can talk much about that, what I believe those limits should be. And you will notice that that's the genesis of the A22 amendment, is getting those limits in line with the medical experts. And the first one that you will notice is the concentrates. And actually, that is probably the most concerning. The OCM rules that 80% is the limit for THC concentrates. However, as of August 15th of 2024, the Minnesota Society of Child and Adult Psychiatry noted that 70% THC concentrate limit is dangerously high. And at that time, no other state was known to have that extremely high dose. So if there's one thing that I could really have you mark as incredibly important is changing that concentrate limit to the recommended 30% THC limit, and you will see that is in the A22 amendment. There are a few other limits too that should be adjusted as well, and my comments are based upon a number of I'd be glad to share the references: National Academies of Science, Engineering, Medicine, Cannabis Policy Impacts, Public Health and Health Equity of 2024, the Association of Cannabis Potency with Mental Health and Addiction, systemic review, that's in the Lancet, and that was Volume 9, Issue 9. And then the report of recommendations of the High Potency Cannabis Think Tank to the state of California, and that was in October 30 of 2024. And I don't want to take too much of your time, but you will notice on the chart that I have given you on THC content limits, you'll notice the tropical transdermal limits are currently 1,000 milligrams per package. The recommendation is half of that, 500. The flower, concerningly enough, has no limit. Of course, the recommendation is 10% THC. And then the low-dose hemp edibles were straight in line with that, not any issues there at 0.3. And I don't think I mentioned, the combination flower and THC concentrate should be banned. We have a 50% total THC. And if anyone would like, I'll be glad to share those medical pieces with you about why it's important. That's kind of a very quick run through, Mr. Chair, on the limits that I'm hoping we can consider going forward. And I wanted to know if you want any questions, or if you want me to move right to the second piece we might talk about, which is labels.
Sure, we'll pause for questions at this point. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Nelson, for your continued work on looking to protect consumers and prioritizing public safety. And I wondered, Mr. Chair, if we could have the OCM interim director just maybe comment on these levels, because I too am also surprised that in current law, if you look at Senator Nelson's A22, the office may establish limits. And I just think, especially in a policy area where the legislature is relatively prescriptive when it comes to licensing, why we wouldn't have that more robust discussion and debate on what some safe limits should be. So I just wanted to see if the interim director had any comments on the proposed limits that Senator Nelson has presented today.
Welcome, Mr. Tobble.
Senator Dibble, Senator Rasmussen, Senator Nelson, thank you. So I would note that we went through the rulemaking process. As you noted, it was that the office may establish limits, but I think in light of the office's commitment to the idea of public health and safety and consumer confidence that products are safe and will not be dangerous, we thought that it was important to set some limits. I think one of the things that we looked at and relied on in the research settings was, I think the Department of California Public Health had issued one of the few research studies on the impacts and effects of high potency THC products. And in that, they found that realistically, the sort of big issues are with young people under the age of 26, where there's still sort of that developmental stage happening within the brain. And that when you started to get to THC limits above sort of anywhere in that sort of 60, 70, 80%, you started to get to see some adverse health effects. One of the things I will sort of note about THC limits nationwide, as like multiple states have rolled out markets, is that our adopted rule of 80% actually does make us an outlier, but in the sense that we have the most restrictive. Most states have not adopted any limitation on potency of THC products, and particularly of concentrate products. And so, we took a stance that we thought was more aggressive. I will say, of the thousands or so comments we received on our rules, a solid 975 of which were on the limit on the THC, most of which suggested that we had gone too low. The other thing I would just sort of note generally is that with a recommendation on a flower, so we didn't choose to adopt a flower limitation. That reflects sort of the biological nature of the product, that you grow the product and there's some amount of control you can get in terms of potency, but not too much. And because it's a agricultural product, you're really at the upper ends of about 25 to 30% at the highest THC potency for a flower product. And so recognizing that at that level, you're in a relatively safe space, we didn't think it necessarily made sense to adopt a potency limit. That said, one of the emerging product categories that has been popular in new adult use states are what we would call like combination products or infused products, which are products that take traditional flower products and infuse them with concentrates. This has the ability to get a really high THC content product. And so we did think it was prudent and pertinent for the office to try to adopt a limit of total THC by volume in that space, specifically reflecting that those are the kind of products that can be dangerous, in part because less experienced users who may be used to flower might think that an infused joint or an infused flower product is just like regular product in that 30% range. And so we wanted to ensure that products couldn't get sort of insanely beyond what you might expect from a regular flower product. And so I think those were the considerations we took under as we thought about how do we walk that line between sort of, you know, the market's ability to find out what will and will not sell, but also what do we see as our role and responsibility to ensure public health and safety. And so ultimately where we landed was with the idea of a limitation on concentrates. No limit on flower, but certainly a limitation on the total THC by volume within any sort of infused product.
Thank you. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Director Tauble. And I just would, you know, I know we're not adopting or considering this amendment before the conference committee today, but I do think it's important that we continue to look at the latest public health research as this, you know, as more is available, and remain open to looking at these limits and making sure that they reflect what the public health science is telling us. Because even in, Mr. Chair, in the comments there, you know, saying that 60 to 80%, you know, could have severe adverse reactions, especially for young people, but that's allowed under these limits just has a concern for me. But I appreciate the conversation on this topic today, Mr. Chair. I have nothing else.
Great, thank you. Anything further, members? All right. Thank you. So Senator Nelson, anything further on this matter?
Yeah, just to add to that, I want to thank the director and also Senator Rasmussen for bringing this up. The one thing I did neglect to mention, which I'm so glad you did, is number one, that we would want the office to enforce limits. So not just may establish, and I understand that we are far beyond just may establish, but we need limits. So thank you for that discussion. I have
Great.
one other item, Mr.
Yes.
Chair. And I really hope these limit discussions continue going forward. The second amendment that has been prepared here is the amendment about labels.
And this is
And
the
I also-
A23 members.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chair and committee members, I also printed out even a sheet for you about what the A23 would look like as far as what those labels would be. And again, this would just make sure that currently there are not these labels on the products themselves, much as you might remember how tobacco fought having labels on tobacco for a long time. But we do have those warning labels now on individual packages of tobacco products. But my understanding is the current law does not require any labeling. There's a regulation that there must be a warning posted somewhere in the store, maybe visible, maybe not so visible, and they're not exactly sure what's on that warning label. And so it seems to me that it would make much sense and need, quite frankly, that we do adopt recommended warning statements. And I did hand those out to you. It should be in print no less than 8 type, very similar to the U.S. FDA warnings on tobacco products. We've had those for a number of years now. And we need to also put, in addition to not for children warning symbol, which you see a graphic of on the bottom of your sheet. That should be on each package by the OCM. And then I'll just briefly read those warnings just into the record, which I think very much follow tobacco use. Do not use cannabis during pregnancy or breastfeeding. Warning, the smoke from cannabis increases your risk of heart and lung disease. Warning, cannabis can cause psychosis, addiction, and worsen mental health disorders. Warning, using cannabis before age 25, as the director noted, can harm brain development. And warning, do not drive under the influence of cannabis. I do believe that's already in our current statutes, but those need to be visible on the packages. And I also listed on the sheet for you the rationale for these warning statements based on references from the March 2025 Canadian government cannabis health warning messages, and you're welcome to review that. And I would just thank you for the discussion, Mr. Chair. I'm hoping this is an important issue, and I'm hoping we can see these go forward in the
Great.
future.
Thank you so much, Senator Nelson.
Thank you.
Members, Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Nelson. And I agree that making sure we have appropriate warning labels is an important public health posture for us to take when it comes to cannabis. And so, Mr. Chair, I was wondering if Director Tauble would be able to just respond to this and state what warnings we currently have and what are we missing relative to what Senator Nelson is proposing today.
Director Tauble.
Thank you, Senator Dibble, Senator Rasmussen, Senator Nelson. So we have the stop sign symbol is required to be on packaging for all products. We have what is called a required universal label. A fun fact I've learned in this job is that there's 23 different states and there's 19 universal labels. So we're not quite universal yet. I will say Minnesota has joined Delaware, Maryland, and 3 other states, I think maybe Virginia, in adopting the IICPS universal label, so which is the yellow triangle with the cannabis leaf. So we are hoping to get that more in there. We also have a required statement about the product is dangerous and not intended for children's use, may not be sold for sale outside of Minnesota is required. One of the challenges that every state faces in this particular area is trying to figure out how to get appropriate warning to the consumer. So that's like the full stop there. But then the problem becomes, especially when we talk about small packages, a relatively small package of cannabis products, to get multiple labels on here in a way that is both viewable by the person purchasing them, and we don't create sort of over warning such that all the warnings get ignored because it just looks like nothing, is truly a challenge. And so it's something I think we've wrestled with, and I think we've been appreciative of the authority we have from the legislature to mandate additional signage within retail locations to try to drive some of these messages, and then really try to focus on what is the most important messaging we need on the package, knowing that you have limited space, and with that limited space comes limited sort of eye time by the consumer. And so we've certainly focused on the poison control with the 21 plus, not for children, the universal symbol to try to indicate that it's not for children, and then notes, again, actual text language around not for consumption by children and not for sale or safe outside of Minnesota.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess the only comment I'd have for Director Tauble, and I appreciate the comments and the active work they're doing this, is I would just say a pack of cigarettes is pretty small, yet they're able to put a lot of warning labels on those. And the only other thing I just want to contextualize this and why I think this is important is we've seen a number of budget proposals this year to cut education funding for, especially on educating the public on adverse impact of cannabis use during pregnancy. We also are seeing cuts to local public health entities to do education work specifically on cannabis. And so I think that underscores why having warning labels is so important, especially when some of the funding promises that were made under the original legalization effort are now being clawed back. I think that's where we're hearing some of the public health concerns. But I appreciate the conversation and the ongoing work on this topic. And thank you, Mr. Chair, for welcoming Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Senator Rasmussen. Does occur to me maybe a QPC could do the trick?
Actually, just had a quick comment for Senator Rasmussen. I would note that the office is in the final review of its first round of the Can Renew Community Reinvestment Grants, and 3 of our leading projects focus on youth development oriented towards education around cannabis and other drug consumption. And so we're actually seeing that some of the investments made by the legislature in that Can Renew grant are reaching communities where some of those local public health grants have been hit and some of those other programmatic features are going away. And that Can Renew is really serving, or has the ability and potential to serve as a backfill and a make good to ensure that young people are both getting the message but active in creating the message around the potential dangers of use of things like cannabis before they're adults.
And Senator Pa has an initiative to add to that work as well, which I'm a co-author Members, before I forget, there is written testimony in your packet, so please draw your attention to that. Some of it reiterates some of the testimony we've heard today, some not. So take a look at that, and this will also be made part of the public record. It's also posted at the committee website.
Mr.
Senator
Chair?
Nelson.
Yes, I just wanted to mention one other thing, which maybe somebody can hand out for later reading. I don't want to take your time today, but when it comes to labels, there's a great article that the pages will be passing out to you regarding why labels are needed and maybe looking at some historic things that worked regarding labels from tobacco. And what's interesting is, I just want you to know, this article is written by Dr. Kevin Sabat, who was a White House drug policy advisor for 3 presidents, President Obama, President Bush, President Clinton. And the second author, Robert Weiner, also was a director of public affairs for the Office of National Drug Control Policy under President Clinton. And so I think these are important people to listen to and to think about as we go forward with our cannabis policy here in Minnesota. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for the time to put these things forward, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. Any further members on this? All right.
I'm going to give you
Thank
all
you.
of these. There you go. Thank you so much.
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, committee members. Senator Nelson, my question's not for you, so I don't want to make you wait.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Yes.
It's nice to be back here with our cannabis folks. I know I've taken this session a little bit stepped away, so it's really nice to see everybody here, and I applaud you all for continuing to come out and advocate. And today I specifically want to amplify the voices of people who talked about the issues that you're having with local control. So this message is for you to know that we hear you, we see you, and also that we hope this message gets to city council members, city managers, county commissioners, and the lobbyists they pay here at the Capitol to do that work as well. So I do have some pointed comments about this because I do think it's important that we address this with urgency, since the issue was brought to our attention here in the legislature as being as severe as it is in just the last weeks of session. So, we know that this industry is just starting to roll out. The key things that are important here are obviously all the duties of the office and all of the rules that we put in statute here. But equally as important is the cooperation and collaboration of local units of government. When we enacted this law, we did so with a respect for local control while making sure that we had minimally placed burdens on them. So, yeah. Nope, I don't have any documents. Nope, just me today. Thanks, thanks, Chair. So as we're rolling this out, the state's just begun doing this, and these critical components are coming to light now that licenses are beginning to be approved. And we have preliminarily approved applicants right now who include social equity applicants, who many of us did this work to fight for them and to stand for that, because it is the right thing to do, is to right some of the wrongs of our past. And that's not all who will be affected. This stack of people impacted is only going to continue to grow as more and more licenses go out, because OCM is doing a great job of getting through the applicants as they are now. And so these applicants right now have been calling us in droves, telling us that there are significant barriers that are being presented at the local level with the local retail registrations. And this is happening in some of our largest cities and counties, which can, in effect, create a patchwork of prohibition across the state that was never intended by our state laws. And it's important that we address this today, because this variable is a critical issue to the successful launch of our entire industry on time. Cities and counties have had nearly 2 years to develop a retail registration process of their liking. Yet many of them are still scrambling and inconsistent despite a plethora of resources. There's been committees, conferences, direct access to legislators on both sides of the aisle who are subject matter experts, lots of public attention, and more. Others know what the rules are, and they are purposely overreaching, or they're flat out exhibiting prejudice against our industry. And too many, I've heard personally, all but bragging about how they are finding a way to outwit the state and to find their ways around the law. And for me as a cannabis advocate, that's quite ironic because not too long ago, my community and my friends were arrested for doing the same thing. And those same people are now overcoming those barriers and are sailing the flagships that will get this industry off the ground and will help us really put a final end to prohibition. So how did we get here with retail registrations being such a barrier? When we originally embarked on this journey, we did so after we moved past the futile effort to stop legalization. We got past that, and we listened to the local lobbyists that were here, local governments who showed up, commissioners who came to talk to us, and they expressed three main concerns. They did not want us overreaching into their zoning. They did not want us to try to be the ones responsible for age verifications and compliance checks. And I agree with that. The state's far too disconnected to be on the ground in communities. And they wanted to make sure that the state did not place unreasonable burdens on those local governments because sometimes they just don't have the staff and resources or the expertise to deliver on those things. And while they were demanding that, they also said that they were not confident in the state's ability to be deliberate and thorough enough to meet the high standards that they would hold businesses to themselves if they had the resources and capacity to do so. They expressed that they were not confident that the state could develop adequate resources to communicate with them. So it was very clear to us as legislators that they did not want additional burdens, but simultaneously did not want their local control infringed, and that they were vocally skeptical and sometimes bordering on cynical that the state would do its part to a degree that was up to their standard. That was not an easy task for the legislature to take on, but we did, and we tackled it. And what we did was the state took on as much of the responsibility as possible to lower the burdens on local governments the best we could. We made sure that we put the fewest feasible mandates on these local governments to respect their local control, to zoning, and to do local age verification compliance. And the licensing and regulatory standards were thorough, rigorous, and very transparent in plain language in the law to make sure that we could earn the trust of local governments that we were going to do everything necessary to well vet these programs. But at the end, we left locals with just two core responsibilities: approval of zoning for a new industry and a retail registration process of their liking to conduct and enforce age verification compliance checks. So how is it that with just two responsibilities, we still have cities denying and acting as if it is so complicated to deliver on these things? Both of these things are reasonably within their purview. These are things that they do to some degree already in their jurisdiction for other industries. And miraculously, even with just two of those restrictions, we still gave them pretty broad local control to decide where they want to put their businesses in their jurisdiction, where they want to have their retail registration managed at the city or county level, and how they wanted to do those age verification compliance checks. The state has quite literally taken on every other responsibility, including managing and enforcing rules, the statewide monitoring system, all testing requirements, all business compliance, approving potency, products, channels of commerce. We've made sure that we've hosted an expedited complaint process for our local government so that they can raise concerns that if there's a health and safety standard, OCM will respond within 1 day to those standards and those complaints. We have taken on all responsibility to review all applications, to issue all recalls, to impose all fines and penalties, and to handle licensing renewal and revocations. They created model policies, model ordinances. They standardized procedures that they offered to locals. They had a plethora of resources for businesses, for agencies, and for local governments to use and tap into. And they've managed the medical program transition, which was no small feat. That's every other duty that they have taken on. We accomplished every single principle that we told, and in communication here at the legislature, in those conversations with lobbyists who are the voice of the locals here at the Capitol. We delivered on that. These are, and I don't know if they still are, but the most bipartisan cannabis laws in the nation, because we worked together to respect local control, to work across the aisle and get these done. So here we are, 2 years later, and the office has executed their tasks. They have been responsive. They have created generous resources. The legislators have done our part. We have been responsive. We adjusted and adapted last year and this year without disrupting the launch. Applicants have done their part. They have submitted applications. They have secured locations, capital staff, and taken the risk to get this industry off the ground. So everybody else is ready to launch. But here we are waiting for our locals to do the same. When really, as a reminder, they have two key things to do. So we have received complaints from folks who are saying that locals are, for example, voluntarily choosing to implement complex optional caps on retail registrations without functional plans on how to disperse them. Misleading community members saying that these retail caps are mandatory by law when they're not. They are indeed optional. This is the black diamond level of a challenge to take on when you do not have the expertise at the table and the knowledge of this industry to know how to do this successfully. And these delays directly benefit the illicit market. And it financially harms local business owners who are responsible and part of the critical economic atmosphere in cities. We're hearing that these, some locals, not all, some locals are requiring applicants to take duplicative steps that they already took with the office in order to get this retail registration. For example, repeat background checks, which our background check system is already backed up. And so to voluntarily make that line longer is a questionable decision. They're trying to extensively require longer applications than what OCM required. If you haven't looked at an application, it's not easy. It is a hard thing to fill out. These are not in compliance with 34222 and subdivision 3, where it says very clearly what the 4 criteria are for issuing a retail registration. That it does not say you may, it says you shall. This is going to cost taxpayers money at a time when we have cities and counties at the Capitol telling us that we are offsetting costs onto them, while they are very clearly creating costs for themselves and not talking to their taxpayers about, do you want us to do this? They have 3% of the statute. 97% of the statute the state handles and others handle. And they're choosing to take on these burdens, just driving up their own costs and passing that on to local taxpayers. And some of this seems to be by choice, and some of this seems to be because they're just not familiar, and that's okay too. Some of these are charging cannabis businesses more fees and costs that are above what's in statute. Some are enforcing retail registration caps that are not by ordinance. Some are failing to communicate to potential businesses and constituents when and how they will grant local retail registrations. This leaves businesses in a lurch, unsure of when they can get going. This disrupts the flow of licensing, and it delays the industry. There is no strategic nor financial reason to continue doing that. It does not do good to have a murky way of business in a city. They've been failing to communicate, some of them failing to communicate with the potential businesses and their constituents if they're even going to cap retail registration. Again, they've had 2 years to make these decisions and still have not gotten back to our businesses. Failing to treat our businesses with dignity and respect and parity like any other business. There's been reports of them attempting to enact their own versions of product registration, which is not permitted. Some just have no idea what they're doing, like we heard here today. Some are confused by conflicting information that they're hearing from leagues, associations, committees, conferences, versus what the law and the office is confirming. Some are misinterpreting or broadening the meaning of statute without knowing how or why they're doing that. Others are doing it knowing that it will take a lawsuit in order to stop them, thus creating another barrier for the only people to operate in those jurisdictions as the ones who can afford to sue them. That's not what this was ever designed to do. They're taking reasonable restrictions too far and beyond that, and again, doing so knowingly that a lawsuit is the only thing that could stop it. So despite the state taking on as much of the responsibility to alleviate this as possible, we are still seeing this continue. And so when I was assigned to this conference committee, I immediately started looking through and said, well, it has to be that they have lobbyists here. There's people here who fight for them, that taxpayers pay for. They had to have represented the needs of these local governments, right? I mean, that makes sense. I just may not have heard about it yet. I'll find it in here. And it's not anybody's fault on this committee at all, because it is the job of the people that the locals pay to be here to advocate for them, to tell us if we need to make some changes in the statute and to come to us and talk about these issues. And so when I asked somebody, hey, what's your position on this? I was told, we haven't talked about this a bit at all year. Haven't heard a thing, haven't done a thing, hasn't been a conversation. So here we have lobbyists here who are paid to be here to represent the needs of our local communities that are not being represented, that we did not hear about here in the legislature, so we did not have an opportunity to fix it. And I immediately got to work. I don't represent all 87 counties, obviously, none of us do. But I immediately got to work to deliver for local governments because I believe in the value of community-centered decision-making and supporting our local communities. And I hustled my way, put together something, a few sentences, that would add a vast amount of clarity for our businesses to get off the ground successfully. I offered a clean, bipartisan solution, and I had a simple amendment that our conference committee had discussed, and we were looking forward to talking about more. I hate to report this to you, but as collaborative as I was, as good as I am at this work, my options were rejected, unfortunately. So while we could have taken action to add a few sentences that would vastly help the launch of this industry and miss the delays, I did not get that cooperation because we would not move forward without the sign-off of the people who speak for the cities. So we have a conflict here. And so I hope that the people at home, whether it's cities, counties, townships, whoever you are, you know that the state did try to do something, that we did try to give you the clarity, that we heard you, and unfortunately, it wasn't taken seriously and we couldn't get the sign-off of your representatives here at the Capitol. There's a lot of people in Minnesota that have been saying that there's a delay. You can go back to any of our comments, many of us here on the committee who made comments to the press saying that this would be launched early 25, licenses going out summer of 25. That was the plan, that's where we're at. I want it to be very clear that if there are any delays in your community, wherever you come from, you have to talk to your local governments, your city councils and your county commissioners, because they are the ones in the way. Maybe it's because they don't know, and that's all right, but that's what you're there for as an advocate, is to teach them. The same energy advocates brought to the Capitol here, I need you to take there, because it is up to all of us to push back on this, because at this point, the state cannot add this into the statute, but you can make the difference in your community. And so I hope you go back and talk to them and make it very clear what you want to happen right there at home. So I don't want anyone to think that we heard your complaints and didn't do it. You know, the only way we really could have prevented this or done this differently was if we would have taken a really cynical approach to local control from the beginning. If we had preempted and overreached in the first place. If we had not trusted our local governments to do what they do best, is take care of their community. That's how we could have done that. We could have said that they have to decide how to navigate true party of interest language. We could have put that on cities. We didn't. We knew that was too much. We could have had cities going through every background check instead of doing it at the state level. We could have had them absorbing those costs. We could have done a lot of things, but we made a fair and reasonable decision to just place 2 pieces on cities. So please, as everybody leaves here today and sees this conference committee report, know that we hear you about the local retail registrations. We are just as disappointed that these are being used to limit our industry, to delay our industry. And you deserve to be treated equally as any other business in this state. You're a tax-paying, and you will bring in great revenue, and we're excited for that. But I will close with this, that I'm proud of all of the advocates, the office, our team, Team Cannabis, and I call on the lobbyists for our local governments to do better here at the Capitol, to respect that our industry is one that is going to bring in revenue that this state has not seen in ages. That we are the new tax base, that our purchasers are doing the important things to make sure we can fund our futures and we can have the resources we need. This industry is critical for people in my age group as one of the only ways that we can secure generational wealth. This is important. And we expect that the people who are being paid here to represent our own communities take it seriously too. And so I hope next year we can have serious conversations about that, and that folks will bring the concerns from the cities, from the counties, all of us across the aisle, and we can work together to make sure we're addressing any inconsistencies that remain once we get to next session. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for letting me talk so long. I appreciate you all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Representative Hansen. Thank you for your hard work on this. And, you know, as Representative Hansen indicated, this committee was ready to take that language in, and it was rejected by the local units organizational representatives. So that was disappointing. All right, so now we're going to turn our attention to the report, and we're going to ask council to give us a kind of a flyover of the report so that we have some acquaintanceship with what's in it. Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Chair, members, Ben Johnson with House Research. I've been asked to do a fairly high-level walkthrough highlighting the differences between the Senate and House bills as they came to conference committee and noting some of the differences in where the positions ended up. The Senate took a position that involved the government-to-government relations between the Office of Cannabis Management and the tribes, and that is adopted in the bill. Both bodies had substantial changes to the existing medical programs that are purely technical in nature because of the Chapter 152 references to the Department of Health, and those changes were adopted in the conference committee report. The bills both had references to changes to, excuse me, I shouldn't say both. The House bill added several changes to the hemp business licensing provisions. In particular, the House created a lower potency hemp edible wholesaler license, and that position was adopted in the conference committee report. That lower potency hemp edible wholesaler license has a new fee structure that some individuals testified about today. In addition, those individuals will be able to import and export products in and out of the state with a variety of restrictions on those products. The significant change in the conference committee report is that those entities must make sure that their products are complying with the receiving state's limitations, and they must ensure that those products do not then filter straight back into Minnesota. The House also made some changes in licensing related to lower potency hemp edible deliveries. The changes allow an endorsement on a lower potency hemp edible retailer license that would allow entities to engage exclusively in delivery operations along the lines of DoorDash or something similar dealing with lower potency hemp edibles. The committee did take those changes. There are, that House position, there are some minor changes related to setting minimum insurance coverage for those entities, as well as recognizing that some of those delivery drivers are not technically employees, they are independent contractors. The House position made some changes related to the social equity applicants, talking about individuals who received a stay of adjudication or were adjudicated delinquent, and that position was adopted in the conference committee report. There were some changes made to transportation requirements for the cannabis transporters and the other entities that are entitled to transport cannabis. Transport has to do with taking product from one business to another business. In current law, those transporters must have 2 employees and must randomize their delivery times. Both of those have been eliminated in this bill. The requirement related to multiple employees in a vehicle is effectively replaced by requirements related to locking or securing a vehicle when it is not attended. The Senate had a position related to sales and samples at cannabis events. The conference committee report takes that position. This would allow, at a cannabis event, it would allow the vendors to provide samples to individuals, It establishes limits on the potency and the amount of THC and other cannabinoids that can be in those products. It also makes some clarifying changes related to what is required to be recorded in the statewide monitoring system. In essence, anything that is sold that would be required to be in the statewide monitoring system must also be recorded in that monitoring system if it is given away as a sample. There are some changes related to the manufacturing license for low-potency hemp edibles that also allow some exporting of products that are not technically compliant as low-potency hemp edibles in Minnesota. This is similar to the wholesaler change I mentioned before. This allows hemp manufacturers to manufacture products that cannot be sold as low-potency hemp edibles in Minnesota. They can sell them into other states as long as they comply with the regulations in those other states. And again, they must take steps to ensure that those products are not being returned to Minnesota. There are the changes to the expungement law that Mr. Haase described earlier in his testimony. There are the changes that were described earlier in relation to the testing facilities, allowing those entities to be seeking accreditation while they are also receiving a license. There are the changes that was the Senate position related to healthcare facilities, so that an individual who is on the medical patient registry can have access to both medical cannabis and non-medical cannabis. There are no changes to the healthcare facility's ability to establish reasonable regulations related to that access. For example, there were questions at some point about whether this would require them to allow people to smoke cannabis indoors. It would not require that. There are the changes related to the tribal medical cannabis program and the visiting patients. Those provisions essentially allow individuals who are in the tribal medical cannabis program or who are in a medical program from a different state to have access to medical cannabis in Minnesota. It also extends many of the possession and related protections that apply to medical cannabis patients under the state program. It extends those to individuals who are in the tribal program as well. There are some changes that were the House position on the total amount of cannabinoids that can be in a product. Both the House and the Senate adjusted the beverage limit for low-potency hemp edibles to allow 10 milligrams in a single container. Essentially, a single can or bottle could have 10 milligrams of THC. The House position increased the limit on CBD and other so-called non-intoxicating cannabinoids to 200 milligrams in a beverage. A single package can have up to 1,000 milligrams. Mr. Chair, you'll also see at the end of the bill, there is a new cannabis supply chain streamlining proposal. This was referenced a little bit in the testimony. This would be a proposal from the Office of Cannabis Management. This does not require the Office of Management to adopt a specific policy or specific rules and would not bind the legislature to adopting this particular proposal, but it does direct the Office of Cannabis Management to look into provisions related to streamlining the chain and make those proposals to the legislature for the legislature to act. Mr. Chair, the entire act would be effective the day following final enactment, and I believe I have hit the significant differences between the bills and the new additions that are in the conference committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Questions or comments, members? Representative West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple comments just on the overall structure of the bill. And it's good to see some positive things for hemp farmers, hemp operators in general. And I appreciate the willingness to work on the provisions from both the department and my colleagues in the Senate and House to allow more flexibility on both products that are offered and products that are sold outside the market. I think we made a lot of good progress there, and the wholesaler license I also think is a positive change that needed to happen, particularly because cannabis is a Schedule I drug federally, and that complicates a lot of things in the folks who interact with federal government and federal law. Having that option for them to stay in the regulated but federally legal space of hemp is a big step in the right direction. And in regards to the legislative proposal language that directs the department to develop a legislative proposal to streamline the supply chain, it's somewhat frustrating that this hasn't been done already, since there is wide agreement across multiple sectors that a separated supply chain doesn't particularly make sense and only serves to increase cost. I have 2 questions related to that for the department, if the director could come up and answer them.
Mr. Tauble? Mr. Tauble, or Representative West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director Tauble, for always being accessible and responsive when anything comes up. I wish you just agreed with me on everything, but that'll come in time, I hope. So we heard from multiple patients, I mean, both today and long ago, that the separated supply chain will increase costs. And we also heard from them that their medicinal cannabis is already borderline or even prohibitively expensive. My concern is, since we're delaying the unification of the supply chain by having the department develop, is there anything the department is doing to ensure that once this law completely goes into effect, that patients won't see even more expensive medication, because this divided supply chain situation will increase costs for the businesses that currently offer them those medications?
Director.
Thank you, Senator Dibble, Senator West. So I think there's actually possibly a counterintuitive reality that price shocks may be less felt in the medical market with the divided supply chain, because there isn't a release valve of that supply into the adult use market, which will feature more demand. And so I think there actually is, from an economics perspective, a possibility that we end up in a space where the supply limitations are felt most substantially in the adult use market. And because the adult use market structurally cannot reach into the medical market supply to offset that adult use demand, the price realities may stay relatively consistent during initial market launch for those medical patients and medical providers. I will say the office has also tried to, in its rulemaking, to the extent it can within the sort of boundaries of the regulatory framework necessary to enforce the supply chain ratio, tried to make some gives to operators to ensure there's some ability to recoup efficiencies. So for instance, within the medical combination section of the rules, we have a provision that says, while you have to grow and cultivate and manufacture medical separate from adult use, you can use the same equipment on a cycle. And so most grow facilities have like what they call veg rooms, which is basically once the plant starts to flower and is getting to the point where it can be harvested. So in those veg rooms, you may have 6 or 8. So you may be able to divide them 4 and 2 or something like that. And then, because it would be sort of unwieldy to purchase 2 separate extraction facilities, you can use the same extraction facility, but you just have to use it within the supply chain. You can't commingle the supply. So we've tried to make some allocations to ensure there aren't additional burdens placed on industry. But I do think that for the most part, there is some possibility that we'll see less price shock in the medical side, specifically because of the divided supply chain at the early portion of the market.
Representative West.
Thank you, Senator Dibble and Director Tauble, and I appreciate that response, and I truly hope you are right. Sometimes I am happy to be wrong. I'm less optimistic, though. The other question I have is related to testing capacity, which is an issue that we've all identified, and that one of the best parts of the bill is addressing those concerns. So with the medical market already currently operating, and they have numerous products out that have been tested, I'm curious about 2 things. For the products they already offer that have been more or less vetted, are they going to be required to get those products retested for the medical products? Are they going to be able to maintain those products without having to like go through a new approval from the office for those particular products? And then the other question is, as we know, we have very limited testing capacity, and as we start the market, there's going to be a bum rush of operators trying to get their product tested. Is there anything being done to ensure that these medical products, if they need to be tested or there's new medical products coming online, that they are able to get to the market and not stuck in a testing backlog?
Yep.
Director.
Thank you, Senator Dibble, our Representative West. So I will note that we have been in a state of panic about testing capacity since the office opened last August. And I even sent an email out to a number of regulators and states about how much testing capacity they had at launch. And the answer was usually somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 4 testing facilities. As of, I think, like Wednesday, we had 7 preliminary approved labs, which means they're in the final steps. All they need to do is get their local approval and a final site inspection. Little unsure how much equipment they may have at that stage. That's an unknown. And we had 5 qualified applicants. So we have 12 testing facilities in pipeline, which would be more than Colorado currently has for their total market. It's more than Michigan has for their current market right now. So pipeline-wise, we have, like, I think we're in a pretty good place. And I think the changes that this committee is recommending with lessening the ISO certification means we also might be able to bring on a number of new labs relatively quickly. I think, candidly, once this passes and we have that new authority, we're likely to open up another round of testing facility license applications, recognizing the value the testing facilities play in the market. With respect to the sort of current status, the Chapter 342 requires that every product sold in the state from a licensee be tested by a licensed testing facility. And so we're working to assure that we have a process by which, once the 2 existing medical companies transfer over, that they're able to get new product tested fast. We are also trying, I think, to figure out the best and most efficient way to ensure we don't disrupt patient access in the transition period, and recognizing that there is a unique transition period for the current registrants and eventual licensees. But we do kind of have the backstop reality that in order to be sold in the 342 market, product has to be tested by a 342 licensee. There's not a ton of daylight between the medical testing standards and the adult use, the new testing standards which apply to everyone. And so there may also be some ability to ensure the safety standards are met kind of in an efficient way. But I think we're working through what the reality is with respect to having to have licensed testing facilities test product to be sold. It's sort of a reality we face.
Representative West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Director. One of my questions, I think you answered pretty well, but I may have lost you on the current products. So if you would refine it in maybe a few less words.
Yeah.
So for current products that are tested and proven for sale in Minnesota, so presumably are safe, are they going to have to go, like, I think your answer was they will have to because they need to be tested by a 342 chapter, but I just want to make sure I'm correct. Or
Director.
You can clarify.
Senator Dibble, Representative West, that's correct.
That was less words.
I'm slowly becoming less of a lawyer, and like I switch in and out, so I'm trying.
Very good. Representative West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and no more questions. I do have some concerns there, but Lord willing, we will have the capacity to handle it. I'll just have a few comments to wrap up, and then you won't have to go back to me after this. So thank you, Senator Dibble. But I'd like to thank the committee. It has been mostly a fun experience. I do enjoy working with Representative Stevenson and Senator Port and Representative Hansen. Representative Allen ain't bad either. Senator Dibble. Oh, man. See, that's why you never name people. But actually, Senator Dibble has been also a delight. He brings a levity to this conversation. And a lot of us are very steeped in the issue area, so having a fresh perspective was, I felt, an improvement. Just so we look at things without all these preconceived notions. So I do appreciate you, Mr. Chair. But one thing that I've been trying to do, and one of the reasons I supported the original legalization bill, despite what I described at the time, and I would still describe as significant problems, one of the reasons we don't have an active market today, is to demonstrate that cannabis, I would say, is a individual liberty issue. And that is very much in line with Republican values. And we've seen statements from our current president, statements, Ohio, Florida, Montana, Missouri, many states of the Republican persuasion that now have cannabis legalization. And to my chagrin, Ohio legalized 6 months after us, and they have already done hundreds of millions of dollars in retail sales to our zero, which is something that, thank goodness, this bill addresses. But I think Republicans have been able to really understand the business implications. Like, how do you function in a business environment, or a highly regulated business environment at that? And my frustration with the current direction that has been set is it's so overly regulated to create what I would argue is a fantasy situation where we're going to be an exclusively craft industry. And that sounds great, but the caution I want to give everybody today is with 1,800 medical micro business applications, it's uncapped license, so we're going to see a whole lot of them attempting to get started. It's going to be incredibly difficult, especially with the speed of this rollout. And a lot of people are going to lose their shirts. So despite the obviously good intentions of my colleagues who push a model that is not particularly friendly to growing a small business, they are going to hurt a lot of people because their businesses are going to fail. They just aren't going to be able to compete in this market. And that is something that we will need to continue to address going forward. But Republicans nationally and in the Minnesota House, and one day the Minnesota Senate, stand ready to help make sure this market is safe, the products are tested, people have access to the medicine they need, and that we don't see a ghost town of dead businesses. And that is something we're going to work on. I think Republicans bring a lot of value in terms of we understand economics of the business structures that are trying to be pursued and the difficulties that can be, like the true party of interest provisions, for example. I know a lot of people on the other side of the aisle correctly identified that they would be very difficult to comply with. But those kind of restrictions on ownership and transfers and all these things, well, speaking of intergenerational wealth, the ability to grow and sell your business is crucial to that. And if you only can grow your business so much, you're not going to be able to transfer wealth to your children, or much less have an incredibly profitable business. So we have some issues we need to continue to address. I'm glad this bill does address issues directly related to the rollout we're seeing right now that is not going particularly well, but this bill will help. And that's a big reason why I'll be voting in support of this conference committee report. There is work to do, and we are not even close to out of the woods in ensuring the adult use marketplace is sustainable. On the medical side, we make some progress in this bill, ensuring that their business license will be somewhat viable. But as we've seen in every state, especially states with divided supply chains, the medical market craters and patients go elsewhere. And when you have a ratio you have to deal with and a separate supply chain, it is very difficult to sustain these businesses, and those are the businesses with the expertise to provide people with the medicine they need, particularly kids. So I hope we can continue to work on that. I've heard from many of my colleagues on this conference committee and many stakeholders in the industry, both medical and adult use, that a unified supply chain is the only logical option, and we should be working towards that with the knowledge that we want to preserve access of rare disease medications, particularly for minors. And I think the majority, if not all of this conference committee, supports that. And that's one thing that makes me feel confident that when the department goes with the direction in this bill to develop a legislative proposal, I do have a degree of confidence we will see something workable for everyone, and we'll be able to move that forward in the next session. And I hope my colleagues will work with me to achieve that goal, because that is very important to ensure access in the medical market. And lastly, I want to say, despite my criticism earlier, I want to reiterate, it's been a pleasure to work with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. You know, we disagree, but we disagree, I believe, respectfully. And we worked in a bipartisan manner to put together a bill with priorities from both parties. And even when my opinion was completely irrelevant 2 years ago, I appreciate Representative Stevenson allowing me to at least listen to the conversation and make some adjustments to the bill. So to the people who are concerned about the hemp industry, I understand your concerns, and especially around the non-intoxicating products, which is why we're raising the limits. I will continue to work to make sure that the hemp industry that's developed over the last 7-ish years continues to be viable into the future. To medical patients, I will be working to make sure that you have access to your medications and there is no disruption if I can help it, and that we can make them more affordable going forward. And to people trying to get into this business, people trying to get their licenses, I do agree with Representative Hansen that we could get some clarity on how you can actually start your operations. There's a lot of confusion there that this bill helps with, but it's also my goal that we provide avenues for you to grow your business beyond the present constraints. This bill doesn't address that, but that is something I'll be working with for as long as I'm in the legislature, so that people can succeed and not just survive at best. So thank you, members, for your indulgence. Thank you to the office for answering my questions, and I hope we all can work together both this year and the next to ensure that the goals we all share are met.
Thank you, Representative West. Senator Port.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the committee. I share Representative West's sort of acknowledgement of how well this committee works together. And I think that that is a testament to the commitment to making sure that this industry is able to grow and thrive in Minnesota. I want to thank the Office of Cannabis Management. We gave you a very big job over the last few years, and I appreciate how thoughtful you have been through that process, how willing to engage with legislators you have been. I think it means we have, the makings of a continued really strong relationship between the agency and the legislature, which is good for all of us and for the industry. I want to talk for a moment about the Expungement Board, who's doing incredibly difficult work, very technical, very complicated, sort of tedious work, looking at individual file after individual file. I'm glad that we were able to get in here the statutory changes so that more just cases are able to be in front of them. I also am glad we were able to get agreement to dismiss or to expunge the cases that had dismissals of other cannabis charges. That's not enough. That represents only about, to the board's estimate, only about 14% of cases that have other dismissed charges with them. And those cases will sort of be held in limbo now. They won't be able to be expunged. So, I just want to reiterate my commitment to this piece of the legislation, which I really, from the beginning, has been the core reason to do all of this, is to undo some of that harm that was perpetrated by the state. And so it is our responsibility to make sure that those charges are able to be expunged. And the court has told us what we need to do in order to do that. And, that will be a piece that I will continue to fight for next year to make sure that all of those charges, all of those cases can be expunged. It's not in our bill, but to the taxes piece that has been brought up multiple times, it is really frustrating to me that this is a piece of the broader negotiations that have to do with revenue for the whole state, was that a piece of it really settled on this cannabis law. Representative Stevenson and I worked really, really hard 2 years ago to keep our tax rate no higher than 10%. because we've seen what happens in other states when the tax rate is too high and it makes the legal product too expensive and encourages an illicit market to continue. It is frustrating to me that House Republicans brought to the table and accepted only 4 revenue increase sources across the entire state budget, and this is one of them. When we legalized adult use cannabis, we talked about how this is not a cash cow. It is not the answer to the state's budget concerns. I am frustrated to see that it is being used in that way because it will not be successful. It will have, I believe, a detrimental effect on the industry. It will be more difficult for people to sustain those small businesses that Representative West was talking about, and it will not be enough money to be the answer to the state's budget concerns. It's just not. There are other avenues that we have in this state that do not put this onus on, to people's points, grandmas who are trying to buy, the tincture or the cream that they need. This is not an industry in its infancy that we should be trying to sort of tax the state out of fiscal concerns. So I am frustrated about that, and I hope that it is something that we will continue to have conversations about in these remaining days of session. To Representative Hansen's work on the local piece, I think that is a critical piece of it. We worked really hard, in particular the Senate worked really hard to make sure that there was a local control component. And perhaps I was naive about how that would be used in some cases. It is no secret that I have done significant work on zoning and land use reform, and that was the purpose of the local control in this bill, that localities could require where businesses were, that it fit with commercial, being in commercial, that industrial was going to be industrial, that those pieces the localities still had control over. And it is frustrating for me to hear a number of stories that I can't believe I'm going to quote Jim Nash, but it is not local control, it is local out of control. And that is something that as we can move forward, we hope to provide more clarity on. It is something that I hope we can continue to just have open conversations with the groups representing the cities to maybe get some guidance out to them, not through legislative form, but just through working with those city groups. I am hopeful that one of these days I will get a Republican vote in the Senate on one of these bills. Don't think it's going to be today, but maybe. But thank you to the chairs, thank you to the agency, thank you to all of the advocates who continue to bring your stories to us so that we can help build this industry in a really collaborative way. I hope that continues for many years to come, and I look forward to voting for this agreement, particularly because of the testing pieces in here, which has also given me much anxiety over the last year. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Port. Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to everyone on the committee for the great work on this. Just building off of what Senator Port just said, I just know we had 15 Republicans in the House vote for this. So Senator Rasmussen, I think you got some cover, 15, that's a lot. I just wanted to pause and also thank Senator Dibble for working on this. I appreciated Representative West's comments about a fresh perspective, but I also want to acknowledge that you've been working in this space for a decade, actually, as the original author of the medical bill. So, you've worked on this for a long time and really appreciate and set the groundwork for the work that Sarah Port and I were doing in 2023 and everything since then. So appreciate your work on this, and thanks for the good hearing today.
Thank you, and I'll just make some closing comments. I also appreciate the work of this conference committee, and I really, really appreciate Representative West Want to make sure he knows that. No, everyone who, everyone on this, it was actually a lot of fun, and I learned a lot, and was happy to bring in the perspective from, the OG days of the MedCan fights, and that is a wild story, as everyone knows. So someday over well, I haven't had a THC beverage yet, so maybe over my first THC beverage, I'll tell you all the secrets of that journey. I did want to respond just very, very quickly. Everyone articulated my views extremely well, particularly Representative West. Everyone knows my focus is on access for patients to the medicine they need to bring relief in the lives, of dignity to the extent possible. And it has been frustrating, even though we have for many, many years now tried to go back and make the product more accessible and more affordable through changes in the registry and, the cost to patients and the types of products that are available, and still it's too expensive. That is very, very frustrating to me. To those who essentially blocked the various ideas around bringing costs down in the new adult use and combined market because of lack of trust and concern about what that might do to the market and what we want to, our aspirations for the market. I respect those concerns, and I've received so much assurance it'll be fine. We've got 5 new applicants into the MedCan market, and if we can gain access to medical products, and or gain access to production of medical products, there'll be more product and more competition, et cetera. I am paying close attention, and if that does not transpire and that does not develop, I am in strong support of the initiative that Senator West is supporting. I already am in strong support of that, but I'm going to be watching to see how things transpire as the new market rolls out, because that is my focus. We cannot leave these children with seizure disorders without the medicine they need. That is unconscionable. I will not accept that in Minnesota. And we've seen the collapse in other states by those who, as we move into adult use, those policymakers in those markets that haven't paid attention to what people need. So that's my focus. All the rest that's in the bill, I think, is good work. And work that to be done. Senator Hansen, or Representative Hansen articulated, and Senator Port has agreed to continue to take me to school so that I can understand all the dynamics. I can better understand the issues that were raised at the table today, and we can work on making this whole marketplace better for everyone. So with that, I conclude my comments. Anyone else? All right. Representative Stevens, you have a motion.
Mr. Chair, I moved to direct nonpartisan staff to prepare a conference committee report, and I also move that nonpartisan staff are empowered to make technical and conforming changes to the language approved by this conference committee in order to reflect the intent of this conference committee.
All right, members, to the motion. Any comments or questions? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion carries. Thank you, members. The conference committee, I guess we do this electronically. The signature will be made available to you soon, so please pay attention. Let's get that report signed so we can get it up to the floor. With that, we are adjourned.